when I did the Poison record, I wasn't really thinking too much. It was another background vocal gig. But surprisingly, that record went huge. Like Unskinny Bop was a massive song.
Hey, Paul, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Where are you calling from, Paul? You're out in Vancouver, correct?
Yeah, Vancouver Island, actually.
Oh, okay. Oh, right on.
As far west as you can get.
Not too bad. Well, I'm about as far south as you can get in Canada, so not too far.
All right, where are you calling from?
Windsor, Ontario, right across from Detroit.
Oh, right. Okay, that's kind of a cool place to live. Go check out Detroit.
Oh, yeah, especially for music. It's fantastic.
Yeah. You see a lot of shows across the border there.
So when I do these, I like to start at the beginning of you as a musician and then work our way up to the new record, the new Defiants that you guys have coming up.
Sure.
So I guess starting from the beginning, where did you grow up and how did you get started in music?
Yeah, well, I grew up on Vancouver Island. I studied a place called Qualicum Beach. I still live in the same town I grew up in. And when I was young, I always knew I wanted to be a writer. Always knew I wanted to hopefully one day get a record deal. And it all started touring in cover bands when I was about 15. And on the side, I was just chipping away at writing songs. And eventually, by the time I was 19, I got offered my first record contract. And that's kind of where it all began. So I was constantly shopping music to record labels. And then, one day someone took a bite. And in fact, I got so lucky that, a couple other record labels also wanted to sign me. So that allowed me to cause a bidding war and get the thing that I really wanted, which was Bruce Fairbairn to produce my first record.
Well, I would imagine too, being from Vancouver, I mean, he would him and Bob Rock, I mean, probably would have been like the people, especially to be local.
Yeah, but they was, just being local wasn't good enough in terms of their career at that time. They only worked with major artists. So I think Bruce reluctantly got forced into producing my first record. But that ended up, becoming a lifelong friendship with the man until he passed away. He gave me jobs working on Poison's Flesh and Blood record and the Scorpions' Face the Heat album. And just basically if I was in town and he was working on something, he'd throw me in the mix. So what a lovely, compassionate man to do that.
That's amazing. Yeah, especially being that age, 19, 20, 21, and getting to say, oh yeah, I worked on Poison and worked on Scorpions. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. I was pretty nervous when I got called into those sessions. And then it just kind of became, you do realize when you start touring with all these major acts that everyone's just people. Everybody has the same problems and things that you have, and it became more comfortable for me to be inside the business. But for sure, when I started, it was very, very nerve-wracking.
Tell me about, so you mentioned the Scorpions. I'm a massive fan, so I have to ask, how was it? It was Face the Heat you were on, correct?
Yes, correct, yeah.
How was it working with that? What's the story behind you getting to work on that one?
Yeah, well, it's a couple things. First of all, and I'll throw Danger in there at the same time. Part of the reason why all of these things happened is when I made my first album with Fairbairn grabbed an engineer named Erwin Musper from Holland.
Oh, yes.
Right? Yeah. And so Erwin had worked on the Def Leppard Hysteria record, but just a million albums. Great engineer. So that's how I got to work with Danger because they tried to get Bruce Fairbairn to produce their record. He said no. Erwin said, hey, their favorite album at the time was my record. So, Erwin said, hey, I can get you that same sound as the Paul Laine record. How about I produce your record? So they agreed to that. Then Erwin was called in to be the engineer on Face the Heat with the Scorpions. So that's the sort of 6 degrees to this guy. So,
yeah.
And he, of course, could speak German because he was a Dutch guy and spoke Dutch and German fluently. So that ended up being not only a great partnership with Bruce Fairbairn in terms of days they didn't feel like having to translate, if you will. They could have heated conversations in German, and then Erwin would give the softer side of the story back to Bruce Fairbairn. I mean, don't get me wrong, they all spoke English very well, but, in those kind of heated moments, they would resort back to their native tongue. So yeah, so that's kind of how that all came about. I believe that Irwin was also rooting for me to be on that record. And so stepping in, when I did the Poison record, I wasn't really thinking too much. It was another background vocal gig for me. But surprisingly, that record went huge. Like Unskinny Bop was a massive song.
Did you sing on that one?
Yeah. I wrote and sang all the background vocal arrangements on that entire record. So that was my first sort of gig where Bruce Fairbairn said, okay, I'm going to have you sit in the studio for a week and just put down whatever you want. You put your writing brain, your arranging brain on this. And then, of course, that helped me kind of secure more work with him because he could trust that I could come up with, kind of interesting things and different approach to songs that would maybe not be so stock. And then, God, I forget the question because I'm rambling.
Sorry, something about the Scorpions.
Yeah. So then, when we moved on to the Scorpions, it was kind of the same thing. And one of my strangest job on the Scorpions record, besides coming up with arrangements with Bruce, was he wanted me to Americanize some of Klaus's lead lines. Meaning, like, as you know, Klaus has a pretty distinct style. And
he's got a very distinct accent, too.
Accent, right. Yeah. So I don't know why on this record they felt like they needed to calm that down a bit. I think that was from Klaus's point of view. So I had to follow Klaus around for like 3 weeks, learning to kind of sing like him. And then I would double lines that he felt were too German sounding.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. And because I was a giant fan of the band, I was very, very nervous that whole time. Wanted to make everybody happy. Didn't want to let Klaus down. And this was like one of my big childhood bands growing up. I had every record, right? So that was a real nerve-wracking session.
Yeah, and like you said, the album went on to do quite well too, and there's some brilliant tunes on that. Alien Nation, and there was another single. I'm blanking on the name of it right now off the top of my head.
Yeah, We All Live Under the Same Sun.
Yep. That was great. No Pain, No Gain. That's the other one I was thinking of.
No Pain, No Gain. Right.
Okay, so tell me. So you sort of alluded to Danger, and how that happened, but was the band already kind of looking at you when they started having legal problems with Ted at the time?
I guess so. Again, because of the Erwin Musper connection, my friendship kind of started with the band while they were making the Screw It album. And that's simply because Steve and Bruno kept bugging Erwin to give them my phone number. So one day Erwin calls me from Holland. They're recording at Whistlord Studios there. And he goes, "Hey, I got these knuckleheads. They want to talk to you. Is it okay if I give your number?" So they did. And then that just kind of started a phone friendship. It was never... during the making of that album, I get a call maybe every 6 weeks or 2 months, and then we just rap about music and have some laughs. I thought they were really, really funny guys. And, we shared the same engineer. So one day I hadn't heard from them for about 6 months. And of course I was reading that there was a bit of issues in the band. And then they called me, and I could tell, I go, "Man, I bet you they're going to ask me to come and join them." And that's what they did. So I think it was, number one, they were a fan of my voice, were really interested in see what it would sound like against the album that they were making, which was, of course, the Cockroach record. When I joined the band, the record had been done already. It had been finished.
Yeah, because even you listen to the two, you and Ted sang basically the same thing with some differences.
Yeah.
A lot of the songs are virtually identical, right?
Yeah, like I said, the record was done. They flew me into Le Studio.
Oh, Morin Heights.
Morin Heights, yeah. I had 3 days to do the entire record. And so that was kind of my first inroad into the band and professionally. And at that time, they were still siding with Sony. So nervously, I was awaiting while we were recording. Basically, I'd record 4 songs a day. The engineer, who was Paul Northfield, would just do a quick mix, send it into Sony. So by day 2 rolls around, I'm like, I could get fired from this band right now if Sony doesn't like it, right? So if you can imagine being in my shoes going, well, I guess I'm completing this record and maybe this isn't going to work out. So by the end of day 2, Sony was like, "This is great. We love it. We love this guy. We're interested in signing him as a solo artist." So that was cool. They gave me all the confidence in the world, and I was off to the races with the band.
Because you were signed, or I don't know if you were still signed at the time, but the first record, wasn't that Elektra, if I'm not mistaken?
That's correct. Yeah. I was signed with Elektra in America. So I had kind of had that distinct problem of being a Canadian artist who was signed to an American label. So Canada, in terms of Canada and the music business, they did not consider me a Canadian artist.
Are you serious? So you didn't qualify for CanCon?
I qualified for CanCon, but let me tell you what was going on in the music business back in those days. So like if you were signed to Elektra or Warner's or Atlantic, Warner Electric Atlantic was the subsidiary in Canada that would handle you, right?
Yeah.
Now, because it worked and operated differently than their parent companies, they would handle the artists differently. So if I was Canadian and signed to Warner's Canada, I would get all the play, all the CanCon play that I could possibly, muster, right? But because when you're a Canadian artist signed to Warner's, and this is why I didn't want to sign a Canadian record deal, even if you sign an international contract that says guaranteed release in the States, Warner Brothers America only has to release it in one state, in one city, to make good on that contract. So that's what they would do. Warner's America would just release, I'm going to release a single in Buffalo. There, we've held up our end of the contract. Whereas if I was signed to America, I would get guaranteed radio play across the States and the rest of the world. So that's why I signed an American deal. But what would the backlash at radio in Canada would be the radio promotion people would be like, yeah, well, we're not going to promote this Canadian artist that you want because he's signed to your label, because you won't do favors for us in America. So I became that sort of weird pawn in radio promotion game in terms of Canada. So yeah, there you go. History lesson.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I didn't realize that, but that explains so many bands. I mean, Harum Scarum and so many others who kind of went through a similar thing.
Yeah,
at that time.
Yeah, it was a little bit more the Wild West, and of course, radio was different because there was all these independent promoters that dealt with territories. Now it's like that doesn't exist.
No.
It's basically a monopoly now in radio. But back then, you could have a regional hit. It could be some mom and pop radio station that decided to play your single, and it had enough broadcasting power to reach, 200,000, 500,000 people, and you could have a local hit that then would become, national. That doesn't exist anymore.
No, I mean, I look at the Canadian band Moxie.
Right.
There's pockets of the U.S. where they're huge, but the rest of the U.S. has no idea who they are.
Sure, and that's because of independent promotion and the way that radio worked by territories.
Unreal. It's funny. It's almost like wrestling in that regard. That's
yeah, you're right. You're right.
Wrestling.
That's a good analogy, man. I like it.
Well, it's funny because a friend of mine, I've always sort of peripherally followed wrestling. I'm not the biggest fan, but a friend of mine got me into it a few years ago, and he explained the history of it. And he said, well, bands. He said, it's kind of the same thing where you get really big in a territory. That's kind of what wrestling was back in the day.
Right. Local hero.
All right. Wow. We're quickly running out of time here. Well, I'll tell you what, let's talk about, before we jump into the new record, you've got a couple projects and bands in the last couple of years I'm really curious about. One thing I really liked that you did a few years ago was the Odyssey Desperado album.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just, every now and then someone reaches out to me to do background vocals, on a record. I had been in Athens, Greece, playing some shows. So I met them there. And just kind of became fast friends. And they just said, would you consider singing some background vocals on this record? So that's how that happened. Yeah, there's not a lot more to say about that. That was just kind of one of those things that felt right to do at the time.
Yeah. It's funny, too, because I thought you were singing lead. And then when I pulled it up, I went, wait a second. The singer, Manos, I think his name is, you and him sound remarkably similar.
Yeah. Yeah. Which was, I think it was, one of the reasons to have them have me sing backgrounds that could match his voice.
So tell me about, you've also got another new band, Jet Set Junkies, who, I mean, you've got Bruno mixing. I mean, if you sing any hard rock, it's going to have some kind of Danger Danger, your solo stuff, Defiants. I mean, it's going to sort of fall within that realm.
Sure. Yeah, I can't escape myself.
For sure. Tell me about the new band, though. I mean, honestly, the first single, Up, sounds like it. I mean, it totally could be on the Defiance record.
Sure. Yeah. So how that started is, I have a buddy of mine. His name's Lee Revel, who's in the Blood Red Saints. And Lee and I met each other 30 years ago. I was doing an MTV tour in the UK. He was playing with Gary Hughes. We just became friends on those festivals. When I left England, this was just right before I joined Danger Danger, we did a handshake deal that one day we would make a record together. So fast forward to 2016. So that was 1991. 2016, I'm at Frontiers Festival in Milan, Italy, and this guy taps me on the shoulder and says the same joke that he said to me in 1991. And I was like, Lee. And he goes, hey, mate, we're on the same show tonight. I'm like, who are you here with? He's like, I have this band, Blood Red Saint. So we had a reunion. He said, well, what are you doing besides the Defiants these days? I said, I'm writing for television and film. I said, do you want in? And he said, yeah. So we started composing together on TV shows. And I got him signed up to the sync licensing company I was working for in New York. And then we just thought, hey, we were actually working on this show called Supercars of the 80s with David Hasselhoff.
Oh, amazing.
Right. So we wrote a lot of music for that together because it required kind of this hard rock 80s stuff. And there were songs that we just put aside and we're like, that song's too good to put in this show. And so we thought, well, if we're writing these songs for television that we don't want to give to television, why don't we just make a record out of it? So that's what we do. We're just slowly compiling songs that we refuse to give to television or film. And that's how the Jet Set Junkies thing. And then again, making good on the promise that we made each other, in 1991. It's important, it's important to do those kind of things.
Oh, yeah. It's funny you dropping, Gary Hughes' name. I just interviewed him. Paul Northfield, who tracked the vocals for Cockroach. Talk to him too, so it's funny all these connections. The whole hard rock scene is just like one just massive incestuous weird family, right? Like it's kind of crazy in that way.
Yeah, and it keeps sort of getting smaller, and as the years go on, I feel like we're gonna just be like Time Warner Group of metal.
That's amazing. So, all right, let's talk the new Defiants. So how did the band initially come to form? I mean, it's basically the old Danger Danger guys, a little bit of a lineup change, but how did the whole thing come together? Was it Serafino just saying, I pretty much want your version of Danger Danger to do something kind of thing?
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't that. That's the kind of the popular misconception of how this goes. Basically what happened, 2012, Serafino started reaching out to me and offering me a solo record deal every year. Basically, New Year's Day, I would get a letter from Serafino saying, please, Paul, would you consider making a solo record? And at that time, I had my band Dark Horse, and I was full on in the country music world. I was like, no, don't want to do it. So every year, almost every New Year's Day, I get another one. So finally, I think he figured out that Bruno and I had a really strong friendship because Bruno mixed the Dark Horse record as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard some of the stuff, but I didn't realize he had mixed it.
Yeah, he mixed it. Yeah. He approached Bruno and said, hey, would you consider making a record with Paul Laine? And so he called me up and I went, sentimental. He's coming in through the back door to make this happen. So we had a conversation. We both agreed that it might be fun, to do it. And because when I was in Danger Danger, we only ever wrote one record together and it was hell. When I joined that band, it was basically I was the mistress, I was the third wheel in between Steve and Bruno. So after we made a record together, I just said, you know what, guys, you write your third of the record each and I'll just hand in mine myself. So that's how we worked in Danger Danger. I just didn't want to break that team up or create any more
So
angst.
It's Bruno and Steve had their partnership and it just caused too much problems, you getting in the middle of it.
Exactly. What seemed like it was that way. So it was always compelling to both Bruno and I, like, hey, what would happen if we wrote together, anything. So that album or that record deal allowed me to explore that. So we spent 3 months having the time of our lives, just writing, because we thought no one's going to buy this record. No one's going to care. So we wrote the record, recorded it. And when it got released 2 weeks later, it made top 50 in Billboard and on the Heat Seekers charts. And we were like, what the hell is going on? So that kind of just exploded into us going to Europe and playing festivals and doing all that and going, okay, well, people seem to really like this, you know? So yeah, that just led to making more albums. So we've had a, it's real comfortable, easy thing, him and I writing together. We kind of finish each other's sentences musically, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
So,
oh yeah.
You know, we don't fight about anything. We think like each other, and in the places where we don't think like each other, it's always better to listen to the other guy's idea.
Yeah. So tell me about this now. So you have, you know, like on the second record, you guys brought Steve into the mix. He was just a drummer on that, right? Just a session drummer. Like he didn't really have much to do with the writing.
Exactly, because we record the drums last on every single record. So basically, Bruno and I write all the drum parts, program those drums. And then we recut the album to the demos, but we still use the demo drums, fix anything that we need on it. And then the last thing we do is we go into the studio with the drummer with it completed. We're pretty like OCD on things like that, on arrangements. Because we're both songwriters and players, it's pretty hard to walk into a session with the drummer and ask, hey, what do you think? It just wouldn't work in terms of how both Bruno and I work. So we thought with the second record, it might be nice. Van wasn't available. Van, of course, tours with Enrique Iglesias. That's his kind of number one job, right? So it just didn't line up. And we thought, well, why not Steve? That'll be fun for the fans. Never realizing, you know, the danger thing. Like either Bruno and I thought for one moment people would be like, oh, well, it's just danger all over again. No, it isn't. So that's how that, but you know, it was lovely to have him come in. And then he came and played a couple shows with us, which was fun. The fans loved it. But we knew when we were going to do album number 3, we'd go back to Van.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say too, I mean, I enjoyed Steve being on the second. He was a great drummer.
Of course, yeah.
There's a certain nuance or whatever Van does behind the kit that made the first album pop in a certain way.
Yeah, like people play like their personalities.
Yeah.
And Van is like like a Jack Russell after a tennis ball. So you know, he kind of brings that kind of youthful enthusiasm to the tracks. You know, we knew that we needed that on the new record because we were going to do a little bit heavier stuff on it. We knew we were going to do some up-tempo things. We weren't going to do the traditional ballad per se, although there's a couple sort of mid-tempo ballads. You know, we kind of felt like Van was the man.
Yeah. Any particular songs jump out at you from the new record, or any that have like a funny story behind the writing or recording or anything like that?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the next single that's coming out, I think it's in another week with the music video and everything. We were going to cut right up to the very end of handing this album into Frontiers. We were going to cut that song. And Bruno and I were like, man, this is like the biggest, dumbest song we've ever written, right?
Which one's that?
Go big or go home, right? Not meaning dumb in a derogatory way, but just, you know, like when something is so obviously an anthem,
yeah,
we just call those kind of things like big, dumb songs. Like I'm on the Highway to Hell is a big, dumb song in a good way, right? So Go Big or Go Home is kind of like one of those big arena rock songs that we thought, hey, maybe we should just save this for sports. You know, like maybe we should just license this out and film somewhere and leave it off the record. Because we'd written plenty of songs for the album, so we had our choices to delete some things, right? But when Frontiers heard the track, they're like, nope, this is on the record. There's no way you're taking this away from us. And besides, we want it to be single number 2. It's like, all right, that answers that question.
No, it's true. I mean, one of my favorite moments is that crazy high note you hit going into the solo on that song.
Oh, yeah. I tend to do that, man. I don't know why.
I mean, you know, I love me some Queensryche and Judas Priest and stuff, and that's what they did. So.
Same, man. It's like every time I do one of those, I'm like, man, this is a nod to David Coverdale or Mike Reno, you know, or Lou Gramm.
Yeah.
And it's fun. I mean, I'm still a fan, right? I love all the heroes I grew up on. It still influenced me.
Oh yeah, I mean Klaus, exactly right there.
Oh yeah, Klaus, forget it.
Yeah, another favorite that I latched on to early. I've heard the record a few times now. Against the Grain. I mean, there's many songs with big catchy choruses and that kind of thing. Against the Grain is definitely old school, just pure '80s rocker kind of thing.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to get a message across from it too, because when you grow up in this life, anyone who kind of makes it in the music business is usually a bit of an outcast when they're younger, and even when they're older in another sense of the word. So to me, it's like, anyone who wants to do something different and do something against the grain, hey, you're going to, like someone once said to me, the kid that sticks his head above the crowd is always going to get a rock thrown at it. So, so to me, that's against the grain, right? That's against the grain. You choose to do something different. You choose to live life differently and kind of follow your own beliefs and your own ideas about who you want to be in life.
Now, are there any plans to tour on this record?
Yeah, I mean, we're a little late releasing this. The record was done a year before we actually started mixing it. Yeah, I mean, in terms of we did the demos and then we just started tracking the next year and thinking, okay, cool, this will be out in the fall of 2022. And nope. So we just kept, being, I don't know, man. We have this kind of Mutt Lange approach to making records. And at least with this album, we got so caught up in all the tiny details about it that it took a lot longer to get it out. And that's the problem, right? We have no one to say stop. Even when the record label goes, it's good enough. Can you guys stop now, please? We're like, yeah, fuck you. It's not right. It's not right for us yet. So
I'm just picturing the old, Def Leppard "Don't Ask" shirt for when the next album's coming, but in the Defiants font.
Yeah, I have never spent 2 years on an album ever. I don't ever want to do that again in my life either. Yeah, just too many questions for us musically making it. And we did really feel the pressure to try and top or at least be on par with Zakusho. And I think that pressure got to us. And Bruno and I both had issues with our parents, in health and stuff.
Yeah.
As they're getting older. So there was a lot of stops and starts due to that, just kind of our turn for that sort of thing. So, yeah. And again, I forgot your question. Paulsheimer's.
I like that. I don't remember what it was either.
All right.
So aside from the new Defiants, is there anything else that we can plug or that you have coming up that we can talk about?
Yeah, sure. I think this movie's still out. I got a song in the new Tom Hanks movie, A Man Called Otto.
Oh, amazing. That's on my to-watch list, so I'll have to look for that.
There you go. Yeah, you'll appreciate it when you hear my voice as you watch Tom Hanks drag out a redneck from a 4x4 truck that's been bullying someone, and he gives him the old 1-2. To yours truly singing behind it. I laughed. I had no idea what scene it would be in, and when I saw it, I was like, "Yeah, this is kind of funny." So yeah, that's probably my latest sort of proud of the fact that I got to have some music behind one of my biggest acting heroes.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's crazy. Do you have anything in any other recent shows?
Yeah. Hey, basically, if you watch Pawn Stars, I have a ton of music in that. Counting Cars, Ink Masters, Below Deck, that TV series.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Wow, you're all over the place.
Yeah. Ragnarok. Yeah. I mean, I could sit here for the next 2 hours and tell you the hundreds, if not thousands, of shows that I write music for. I mean, I've been doing that solidly since 2016. So that's a lot of music over the past 7 years. For sure.
Well, and it's probably hard too, because you write a song, hand it in, and then you know nothing for the next year.
That's right. Yeah. Well, so you know a little bit about that. And that's exactly how it goes. 9 months later, basically a year and a half later, you'll receive your first royalty check and you forgot what you even wrote for, because in television, it's 3 to 5 songs a week that you hand in.
Wow.
Typically. Yeah. Plus 7 edits of those. So at the end of the day, that's up to like 35 tracks that you're handing in. So the work schedule is bananas, but it's a way of staying in the business as a writer. As long as you're composing in film and television, you can be 80 and still working. And I needed a sideline thing that allowed me to be able to get my music out there and not worry about the trends of the music business. You know, if you look at labels like Frontiers, hey, that's great. It's kind of reinvented rock and roll for all of us. You know, it's given us a home to put new music. But sooner or later, Brandon, no one's going to want to see my 65-year-old dancing on stage. I mean, I'm still going to have music to write, right, and play. So it's kind of, that's my retirement, that I can still kind of work and be in the business.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's funny. More and more rockers that I interview, it's the same story. You know, a lot of people are getting into TV, writing with other people, that kind of thing, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, it hits a certain point where you have to diversify what you're doing and what you're working with.
Yeah, Brandon. Well, there's also the feeling of actually feeling relevant.
Yeah.
You know, it's a shameful thing getting older and feeling like you're not relevant anymore. That sucks. And, being able to compose for something that's new TV, new film, it makes you feel like your music still has relevancy because somebody wants it. So it's a good feeling.
Yeah. No, I mean, I look at hockey. They say you're only as good as your last win. In music, you're only as good as your last hit, right? So to have something where, what, you're a writer. What have you done? Well, have you seen this movie? There I am,
And you can just do it under the radar too, right? Which is cool. Like, I don't care. I'm long past needing any glory for anything. For me, it's just the absolute joy of like, hey, I like that actor. I got a track in that film.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to see how music gets married with image, brings a whole new meaning to a piece of music that you've written that you didn't even know about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when it's used in a scene, you're like, that works. I never intended it to be in a scene like that, but that works. Yeah.
That's really cool. So a lot of the music you do for TV does it tend to be more instrumental? Does it tend to be like a full song?
Yeah. So unfortunately,
like you just kind of strumming a guitar?
Yeah, I do both. No, full production. Sometimes I'm writing a, 70-piece orchestra thing and it's all just, orchestral music, like trailer music.
Yeah.
Another day I'm writing a full-fledged bro country song for something. I'm writing blues stuff. I'm writing EDM music, pop music. It's really all over the map. But because I'm a singer, a lot of times my A&R people that handle me in sync licensing will direct me towards more vocal-based music, which is good because you make more money if there's vocals on it, as opposed to just a bed track piece of music behind film.
Plus, there's something to be said for having your voice come out of the speakers.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, well, I've long fallen out of love with my own voice. So. Oh, yeah, there's that guy singing again. Great.
You edit yourself enough times and you go, God, I got to listen to me again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I don't know what the big deal is.
That's why I like these interviews. It's all you guys talking.
Yeah, right.
That's part of me, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. Loved loving all the stories, the TV talk, Scorpions especially. I mean, that still had to be like, I would wear that as a badge of honor till the day I die. I sang on the Scorpions. Sure. Nothing else matters.
Maybe I guess one day I'll be doing Glory Days stories and I'll relive it then on Broadway. Like Bruce Springsteen.
Just you and an acoustic guitar.
Yeah, come on, man. Come on, let's make it happen.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate your time and really loving the new record. So, you talked about worrying about if you could top Zaku's show, and personally, I think you guys probably did. So,
thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.